Good morning, dear juries, audience, classmates, and opponents. I'm here today, standing in front of you to shed the light on a matter that may concern us in the future: voluntary euthanasia. So to prevent any misunderstanding and confusion on this terminology, allow me to give the definition first. Voluntary euthanasia is where a person's life ended at their request in order to relieve suffering from terminal illness and under many conditions. It alleviates suffering in terminally ill patients. The European Court of Human Rights stated that the right of privacy and the right of autonomy include the right to choose when and where to die. As long as certain safeguards are in place, there is also the right to live, which contain in the right to die. It is just barbaric and uncivilized to be stretched on the rack of life, stuffed with medication when you have had enough of life and pain and strife, especially at an age where you have done all what you wished for. A dignified death should be the right for everyone. Euthanasia follows the same theory of dealing with torment in a way that it helps one die peacefully out of possible peril. It is the way the patient values the right of life and death. If the patient has the right to discontinue treatment, why wouldn't he have the right to shorten his agony? Isn't the pain of waiting for this while suffering traumatic? Is it even rational to keep a person with no hope of survival alive in a support system? The answer may be brighter than the sun, but dear opponent, seem that you just want to accept it. Just not seem to understand it well. We are not treating any subject here. We are debating about one of our fundamental rights, which is choosing when it's enough, when we can't bear with the pain anymore, when to shorten the agony. We are able to choose all kinds of things, from who we marry and what kind of job we work in the future. I think when it comes to end one's life, whether you have terminal illness and whether you are elderly, you should have a choice about what happens to you. Let's take Brittany Maynard's case. Suffered from terminal brain illness, traveled from California to Oregon just to mercy herself with dignity and respect her body. I'm pro-life. I want to live as long as possibly could. But I believe also that the right should be for everybody, not just for in some place. Thank you.
Let's state the date for the record first. Is Wednesday, February 24, 2020 at 11:30 a.m. And here begins the trial of Rachel Zane, filing a lawsuit against the federal Canadian government for legalizing euthanasia. Greetings to you all, honorable members of the jury, dear audience, and every lawyer in this courtroom. I am the leader of opposition and the attorney representing the plaintiff today. Following the procedure of every trial, I would like to call to the stand my first witness. May Ms. Zane come to the stand right now. I am Rachel Zane. I am 28. I have been diagnosed with cancer for over a year. I started medical treatment, and as it has become a financial burden for my mother, I decided to apply for euthanasia. But it turns out I am not eligible, not qualified for this treatment. These doctors rejected my application, allegedly declaring I don't fit into the classification the government has made. These doctors now have the power to play God and deny to a vulnerable person with a terminal illness her supposed right to die. And as I am talking right now, I am finally cured, and I have been the healthiest I have ever been. Should I be thanking the doctors then? Applying for euthanasia will always be one of my biggest regrets. And I'm here to save people who think their lives aren't worth living anymore. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Rachel, for your testimony. Ladies and gentlemen, we just heard a story that by itself should get this case dismissed immediately, as its sentence is pretty much clear and evidential, yet our dear opponent seems to have trouble understanding it. Well, they still admit they do. Nevertheless, this question will surely help admit that people should not have the right to die. Dear opponents, if euthanasia was to be legalized, wouldn't the frail lane of trust between patients and doctors be destroyed? How could a patient believe that their doctor is benefiting their life when he or she is counseling towards death? And it is also possible that the doctors abuse their power and euthanize patients simply because they are costing too much money to keep alive. Do you really value human life so little to proudly defend death over life? No more questions, Your Honor. Not to flatter myself, that was an uncommon and ingenious speech I thought of, but now let's get to the most basic part when we defined each and every keyword of this topic sentence. We have, first of all, right to die, which basically means people should have the right to end their lives. Then we have right to live, which means that nobody can try to end your life, which already sounds contradictory and pretty much ridiculous, considering you want the government to do whatever it takes in making laws only to protect you. Thank you.
Dear opponents, do you even know what it feels like to see a family member die a slow, painful death while you're just there, sitting there, watching them suffering miserably every day? Of course not. So today, I'll talk about voluntary euthanasia, which is basically when a person makes a conscious decision to die and asks for help to do so. It is the practice of intentionally ending a person's life in a painless way. It is legal only in Netherlands, Switzerland, Belgium, California, Australia, and New Jersey. Moreover, what I can guarantee you is that all of these countries and states made the right choice and did not regret it. No one can deny the fact that people have the right to die just like they have the right to live. They should be able to control their own body and life. And our country shouldn't create laws that prevent citizens from being able to choose when and how they want to die. Honorable opponents, we all know people have the ultimate right to choose when to die. A different or separate right to die isn't necessary because the human rights imply the right to die. Death is a private matter that no one has the right to interfere with. Dear opponents, we all know that there is no easy way to terminate someone's life, but it's really hard to watch someone you love suffering from pain and agony, and the patient itself wants to end his or her life from unpleasant pain. The right of a terminally ill patient, of a terminally ill person to avoid pain and embrace a timely and dignified death should be respected. Besides, the medical costs for the terminally ill patients is often astronomical. To lots of patients, they have no money to cure their illness and have to wait for death painfully. One of the most significant challenges that occur is the emotions of guilt and shame that a patient has with regards to their caregivers. They begin to feel like a burden on the people they love, creating a reaction that can cause relationship challenges, because it is only natural to push people away to help them to avoid pain. Legalizing euthanasia might not be a popular option in some circles, but it can create organization for the transitory time that everyone experiences in a situation such as this one, by helping someone to find the physical peace they need. There can be a process of emotional healing that can help everyone push through their grief with greater consistency. Then, why not let euthanasia help them slide into eternity without pain, with their beloved ones present? Thank you.
As we are growing older, we start to envision and see life as a tunnel with variable lengths, guiding us to the ultimate slumber of the swans, and carried into this whole new world until we just fade away magically from the universe thanks to the laws that rule our existence. But this soul, this light that's inside of us that we so cherish, is it replaceable or exchangeable? Absolutely not. Well, have you ever wondered why? Why you could easily find a new kidney, or say even a new heart, but could never find a new soul? Well, that, my friend, just shows you how valuable the human soul is. Therefore, legalizing euthanasia makes this one thing that we have, this tiny bit of magic that we have inside of us, all of this just as expendable as a sweater. I'm sorry, but this availability of life that we so are standardizing is just absurd. Since, well, it's kind of stupid from us to just waste our only opportunity to experience the whimsical and magical journey of life. And come on, don't you think that if just 8 countries, well, give or take, are legalizing euthanasia, something must be wrong with it? Because indeed, something is wrong with it. In fact, everything is, ethics-wise and morals-wise. Also, prohibiting the euthanasia is one of the most effective ways to protect the vulnerable patients who are poor, frail, and old from the overuse of the godlike power that the doctors are wielding. Those people are even petrified from those doctors who I would call maybe godlike doctors, because they are strangers and therefore they wouldn't really see the value of their lives, and which those doctors perceive as, well, let's say, not worth living or overall unbearable. And all of this is put under one name: compassion. Do you even know what compassion is? Did you even know that in order to be compassionate, you needed to put yourself in the shoes of the patient, which they obviously did not do, since, well, they're going around and killing them just like that, cold-blooded. And also, when I say that legalizing euthanasia is greasing the slippery slope, it ain't no hoax. Since the 90s, Dutch doctors have confirmed that the situation has gone way off the rails. Oh, and let's talk about the right to live, right to die thing. Oh, since I have the right to live, then I have the right to die. Let me ask you something. Did you even have the right to live in the first place? Were you asked whether you want to be born or not? No, you didn't. No, you weren't asked, oh, I should be born or not. Then why will we have to ask you whether you're going to die or not? It's not your choice. And to sum up this beautiful speech, I would say that legalizing euthanasia fixes nothing. For euthanasia to exist, we'd be kidding ourselves if we still believe that we're in a society of wise minds. Thank you.
Hello, dearest audience, jury, opponents. I am absolutely thrilled and honored to be here today and see all of these beautiful faces. The reason my teammates and I present ourselves before you is to debate a topic that has been discussed for quite a few years. We are here to convince you of our point of view, and the only right one, which is euthanasia should be legalized. And to complete what my team has already said, please allow me to give you some more reasons to why it is a right and not a murder. Euthanasia, or the good death, as we all know it, is intentionally ending a life to prevent pain and suffering. We mostly use it on animals, and the question is, why can we use it on animals who cannot consent, but not mature humans who actually can? Don't you see the double standard here? Society permits animals to be put down as an act of kindness, so the same treatment should be available to humans. It is a totally painless way to end suffering, so we have to allow euthanasia to reduce the patient's pain. Plus, since it is so expensive to keep terminally ill people alive, it would help the impoverished families who cannot afford to pay for treatment. In addition to that, euthanasia can save someone else's life, as in the patient who got freed by euthanasia can donate their organs to other sick people, spare one life to save the other. And every human should have a right to choose whatever they want to do with their own lives. Just like we have the right to live, we should also have the right to die with dignity instead of being forced to endure the pain and just suck it up. A qualitative study using narrative interviews was conducted throughout the UK. The views of 18 people who discussed euthanasia and assisted suicide were explored. These were drawn from terminally ill people. Terminally ill people felt strongly that euthanasia should be legalized. Those who had seen others die were particularly convinced that it should be a right. Some of their valid reasons were both pain, anticipated pain, fear of indignity, loss of control, and cognitive impairment. We humans are truly rebellious. So the fact that euthanasia leads to many suicides, as in the people who cannot endure any more suffering choose to end their lives on the matter of their own hands, you don't believe me, do you? How about I take you all the way back to 1989, where a couple sat and watched their daughter, who had motor neuron disease, commit suicide and die of an overdose? How about in 2005, where a Lawson killed herself with a plastic bag because she knew that she had cancer? So if they're going to die anyway, why not legalize it so they can do it safely with no risk of another illness or a handicap, and with the help of a doctor between their family's arms and in a quiet room, they can say their goodbye and live in peace with their dignity. Death is a private matter, and if there is no harm to others, the state and other people have no right to interfere, and this is why it should be legalized. Euthanasia leaves the choice to the human being. It helps avoid unnecessary suffering and respect and freedom and dignity of the patient. So I don't really see why you're still trying to come up here and try to speak up speak against this, because and try to silence the thousands, millions, if not billions of people who have suffered or have seen others suffer. How dare you?
Honorable judges, opponents, hello. I'm Firdaus, member of the opposition. I'm 16 and I'm a junior at ELARAKI High School. And you know, around this age, people will oftenly ask me what I wanted to do in the future. And till today, as far back as I can remember, I've always said confidently that I wanted to go to medical school, become a doctor and save lives. But today, you dear opponents got me extremely confused, because since when did the honorable job of doctor involve in its professional ethics both killing and caring? The question is rhetorical, of course, don't get me wrong. Killing is obviously not caring, and it is undeniable that in this debate, we are fighting against a ridiculous absurdity. Shall we call it the emotional appeal? And what is that, you may ask? Well, it's the reason why our very dear opponents chose to use the autonomy of choice and the compassionate policy as their principal arguments. But you see, unfortunately for them, my team and I aim to make a change in this debate by shifting the attention away of these nice people who wanted nothing but to help to a more realistic issue. Because, you see, I've certainly noticed that compassionate policy is and will always be the main issue here. Because while claiming that minimizing the pain was their only intention, our opponents really took death as a mean to an end. They literally crafted euthanasia as a mean to help. So, I'm sorry, but is it just me, or does that mean that you're trying to legalize similarly extreme? Instead of thinking about ways to minimize the suffering, instead of thinking of ways to soothe the pain, the first thing that you thought about was death. Well, I'm just saying that when you're confidently standing in front of me and telling me, well, I'm killing him for his own good, and by that, I'm giving him a dignified death, I don't know if I should take you seriously, because that sounded like something a psychopath would say. Indeed, it is the same thing that the Nazis said after killing the disabled and the mentally ill. It is the same excuse they used to defend the brutal killings of wanted people. They labeled them just like you labeled your cases. They labeled them incurably stupid and worthy of life, mentally dead. The real question here is, what tells you? What tells you that after the legalization of euthanasia, those mass murders won't resurface again? What tells you that the euthanasia the genocides that were once disguised as a euthanasia for the best won't become a curse for the vulnerables left? What tells you that legalization won't be a threat for all of us? Well, I'll be waiting for responses in your last intervention, so please don't ignore me the same way you ignored common sense. As a matter of fact, if in the future societies develop a habit of normalizing this concept, doctors and surgeons could even become more prone to put a lot less effort into actually trying to save lives. They would just resort to euthanasia and save their time and resources, and this could catapult into a society where people who need mental help could just fake or find a way to give themselves a serious illness and take the easy way out. For instance, you see, I've got a huge migraine and a serious sharp pain. Since you guys can't comprehend the obvious of this situation, I believe that my pain is untreatable since you guys won't change your mind, and it's unbearable since you guys are wanting to allow such a crime. So following your logic, I am a desperate case. I might as well euthanize myself right now. So kill me, I dare you.
One person has died from unrelieved pain. Every 10 seconds, one person dies from unrelieved pain and severe pain they could have avoided by voluntary euthanasia on their own request, and I say on their own request. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a world where I, a human being, have the right to live, but do not have the right to die, to choose to die to shorten my sufferings. How ironic. We all like the precision of words, don't we? Let's take, for example, euthanasia. Why not? In Greek, eu means good, and thanatos means death. Put together, it means good death. The word explains itself. It is the hastening of the death of a patient to prevent further sufferings. Dear auditories, know that no one is in power to take away your fundamental right over your own body and life. We have to accept the fact that not all diseases can be cured, and that the last disease, the last medicine to relieve the patient's disease would be voluntary euthanasia on their request. The pain and sufferings a person feels during the disease, even with painkillers or relievers, can be incomprehensible to some people, but not for us, hopefully. So the last letting the physical pain aside. Letting the physical pain aside, it is difficult for the patient to overcome the fear and emotional pain of losing their independence. I'm not being optimistic or pessimistic. I am being realistic. And this is what 4 people here should be. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 4 people. I'll let you guess who they are. Might be hard. I'll let you think about it. Thank you.
To capitalize on what my teammates have previously demonstrated, euthanasia is no different from suicide, hence its other title, assisted suicide. Traditionally, as a society, we used to intervene and help vulnerable people overcome their suffering. But in a world where you, dear opponents, want to legalize recognizing death as being preferable to suffering, you are endorsing, if not encouraging, ill people's suicidal tendencies. With that being said, let's take a moment and talk about how inhumane countries who legalized euthanasia are. In the Netherlands, for instance, doctors are euthanizing newborns diagnosed with terminal illnesses moments after they are born. These poor souls are never given the chance to experience life nor see the light. I suppose legalizing euthanasia could provide an easy solution for a baby born with a terminal disease, but what happened to working towards a cure? What happened to our consciousness, and more specifically, what happened to the noble oath of doctors who swore upon their hearts to preserve life as much as they can? Rather than healing and giving life, they are now taking it in a very brief and unspeakable manner. On that premise, this leads us to a more crucial question. What is the emotional and psychological impact of hastening the death of a patient on a doctor? Some would argue that doctors feel relief and comfort after ending their patient's suffering. Logically speaking, do you really believe that killing a person is such an easy task that it wouldn't affect a doctor's mental well-being? Well, unless you're blinded by your will to win this debate, then perhaps you would believe so, dear opponents. Like I said prior, doctors' mental well-being is immensely threatened by the moral pressure and stress that performing euthanasia inflicts on them, therefore hindering their overall performance and efficiency. These said doctors would have to become accustomed to ending lives on a daily basis as part of their workday. And I doubt any one of us would appreciate the government stepping in one day and changing our job descriptions to include suicidal collaboration, right? Legalizing euthanasia indirectly pressures the patient into considering it. Having the right to die and end this suffering increases his will to give up. So instead for fighting for his life, he decides to prematurely end it voluntarily. But here's the catch. His decision sometimes, if not all the time, is made to end his relative's suffering, not his. Thus, involuntary euthanasia can easily be disguised as voluntary euthanasia. When the ill feels burdensome, he gives up his life for the sake of his family. Let's be honest, not all families are loving families. There are far too many people who care more about their inheritance than the still living person that they stand to inherit from, leading them to pressure him into asking for euthanasia. The right to die violates the right to live. Every shred of hope in life should be taken into account and not overlooked. Euthanasia should not be legalized. And to sum up today's debate, I would like to define euthanasia with no sugarcoating. Euthanasia is decriminalizing murder and making suicide lawful. Thank you.
Dear jury's opponents, you were so good. I thought you were so good that you would use Martin Luther. I guess I was wrong about you. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He was one of people that helped and contribute to assure that black people have the right to freedom. And by the right of freedom, it includes the right of die and live. And you think it's a contradiction or out of the subject. Well, he didn't say just the right to live. And as we know, back then, people were, in every block, people were dead. He said that we need to have the right to die, not be taken from cops or you, I guess.
Oh, I'm so disappointed. I didn't get any answer to all my questions. But let me clear that for you. I will give you a definition for euthanasia, because until now you still don't have the right one. Euthanasia is when someone who's not necessarily dying is administered a drug that kills them prematurely, aka ending a person's life because of their suffering, which is the definition of suicide, if I do remember. Isn't that ironic? and ridiculous considering the government is allowing euthanasia while trying to prevent people from committing suicide. Here is one last question, which I probably, again, won't receive the response to. Thank you.
Dear opposition whip, dependent people already feel the pressure of being a burden. The legality of the act does not bear upon serious suicidal considerations. Put another way, think about who a dependent person might be concerned with, burdening. It might be their friends, their family, or care providers, but certainly not the state. I could never understand the opposition to voluntary euthanasia. It is my life, my body. I can do what I want with it, as long as I don't interfere with someone else's right to live. What's wrong with people having dignity in death? Thank you.
Well, I'm going to go over a few points that the Deputy Prime Minister said. First of all, I've only seen stating facts, no argumenting whatsoever. Second of all, killing them, will oh, are we going to relieve the pain? Killing them will be hurtless? That's the first question. Second one, we should stop creating laws that prevent euthanasia. Well then, should we also stop creating laws that prevent suicide? Because same thing. Third thing is, that is not peace, because and also, why not practice palliative care? What's wrong with it? Same thing as euthanasia, they have the same goal, the ultimate goal of ending the suffering, but just one of them is a murder and the other is not. Thank you.
To answer my dearest opponent, yes, we as a society should have vulnerable people to a better state. But how can we help people who cannot be helped? They are stuck in a never-ending cycle of never-ending physical pain. I really don't see how. And what I really don't understand is why you want to make this about yourself. Why can't you let people choose their own destiny? Why can't you let people, why would you try to impose your own beliefs in other people's lives if it's not harming anyone else? Please, try and enlighten me because it's all Greek to me.
Well, honey, I would love to enlighten you, and we did that in our arguments. We explained why euthanasia is bad. We gave you guys an alternative to euthanasia. We gave examples, and we've even tolerated no responses to all of our questions. So, as a conclusion to this debate, and I can see the difference between you guys and us is that you are fighting and begging for the right to choose, while we want the right choice. Feel the difference? Thank you.
Just to say something real quick. Know that the debate today is, I have the right to live, I have the right to die just like I have the right to live, which is voluntary euthanasia, not any euthanasia. Anyway, we are not talking about suicide. There are many differences between suicide and voluntary euthanasia. Voluntary euthanasia, add this to your information, is under many conditions. One of them is the valued time of the patient is less than 6 months. The patient cannot move or get out of bed. This disease will kill the patient at any time. Also, just like the deputy leader said, there is a tiny bit of magic, life and soul. How can you even call it a life when you have to endure endless suffering at a daily basis? How? Thank you.
Throughout this whole debate, you've been talking about the right to live and the right to die. But don't you think it's a little bit contradictory? And by the way, last time I checked, it used to be that our human rights were based on what people weren't allowed to do to us. But now, out of some perverse entitlement, you seem to think that our human rights are based on what people must do for us. Therefore, euthanasia, because if you think about it, we're not euthanizing ourselves. Doctors are doing it for us. So is it really our right? Thank you.